Memory man.
Rudolf Hess.
Nuremberg, 1945. The war is over. The architects of the deadliest conflict in human history sit in a single room, finally forced to answer for what they did. Most of them at least pretend to be sorry. Hermann Goering claims he was just following orders. Albert Speer insists he never knew. Even some of the most brutal men in that courtroom managed to summon something that at least resembles remorse. But one man doesn't bother. One man sits there, hollow-eyed, almost absent. And when the moment comes to speak for himself, he smiles. His name is Rudolf Hess, Hitler's personal deputy. The man who idolized the Führer long before most Germans had ever heard his name. A man who, 4 years before this trial, climbed alone into a plane in the middle of the night and flew 1,000 miles to try and end the war. Not because he opposed it, but because he was completely, terrifyingly devoted to the man who started it. And at Nuremberg, with the evidence of genocide laid out before him, with the photographs, the testimonies, the numbers that don't seem real, Rudolf Hess would look the world in the eye and feel nothing. How is that possible? What makes a man that unreachable? And did he actually believe, right up until the end, that he had done nothing wrong? That's what we're here to find out. Rudolf Walter Richard Hess was born in Alexandria, Egypt, in 1894, the son of a prosperous German merchant. He was raised in comfort, educated in Europe, and by all accounts had a future mapped out for him. Then came the First World War. Hess served on the Western Front, was wounded twice, transferred to the Air Corps, and came home to a Germany that had collapsed. The Kaiser was gone. The economy was in free fall. Revolutionaries fought in the streets. For a young man who had sacrificed everything for his country and watched it crumble anyway, the humiliation was total. He was furious. He was searching. And in 1920, he found exactly what he was looking for. His name was Adolf Hitler. Hess heard Hitler speak at a rally in Munich and was, by his own account, transfixed. This wasn't just politics. This was something closer to religious conversion. He joined the Nazi Party within the year, becoming member number 16, not a follower, a founding disciple. When the beer hall putsch failed in 1923 and Hitler was arrested, Hess didn't run. He surrendered voluntarily and served time in Landsberg prison alongside his leader. It was there, in that cell, that Hess helped Hitler organize and dictate the manuscript that would become Mein Kampf. He wasn't just following Hitler. He was helping to build the ideology that would consume a continent. Through the late 1920s and into the 1930s, as Hitler climbed toward power, Hess rose with him. He became Hitler's private secretary, his gatekeeper, his shadow. In 1933, when the Nazis seized control of Germany, Rudolf Hess was named Deputy Führer, the third most powerful man in the Third Reich, behind only Hitler and Goering. But here's the thing about Rudolf Hess. He wasn't power-hungry in the way Goering was. He wasn't calculating like Himmler. He wasn't a bureaucrat of genocide like Eichmann. He was a true believer. His devotion to Hitler was almost mystical. He helped introduce the Führerprinzip, the idea that the Führer's will was absolute, beyond law, beyond question. He co-signed the Nuremberg race laws of 1935, which stripped German Jews of their citizenship and laid the legal groundwork for everything that followed. He was not a passive figure. He was not peripheral. He was present, willing, and ideologically committed. And then, in the spring of 1941, Rudolf Hess did something so strange, so inexplicable, that it stunned the entire world, including Adolf Hitler himself. May 10, 1941, Scotland. A lone Messerschmitt Bf 110 appears on British radar, crossing the North Sea at high speed, Fighter interceptors are scrambled. Then the pilot ejects. The plane crashes in a field near Glasgow, and a German officer limps up to a Scottish farmer and says, in broken English, that he has a message for the Duke of Hamilton. His name, he says, is Hauptmann Alfred Horn. He is lying. He is Rudolf Hess, Deputy Führer of Nazi Germany, and he has just flown over 1,000 miles, alone at night, without authorization from anyone, to negotiate a private peace deal. What was he thinking? The evidence suggests Hess had become increasingly sidelined within the Nazi hierarchy. Göring, Himmler, Bormann, they were all consolidating power around Hitler, and Hess was fading. He believed, apparently sincerely, that Britain's aristocratic elite might be persuaded to dump Churchill, make peace with Germany, and allow Hitler to turn his full attention to the coming invasion of the Soviet Union. He was catastrophically wrong. The British were not interested. Churchill reportedly laughed. Hess was arrested, interrogated, and locked away as a prisoner of war, treated not as a diplomat, but as a curiosity. Hitler's reaction was equally spectacular and deeply revealing. He was furious, not because the mission was wrong in principle, but because it had failed and because it made the Nazi leadership look insane. Hess was officially declared mentally ill. His name was scrubbed from Nazi Party records. The man who had given everything to the movement was, in an afternoon, erased from it. He would spend the rest of the war in British custody, and when peace finally came, the British handed him to an international tribunal. They took him to Nuremberg. Look at the photographs from Nuremberg. Look at the men in that dock. There is Hermann Göring, theatrically defiant. There is Albert Speer, performing regret. There is Joachim von Ribbentrop, seemingly in shock. And there, slightly apart from the others, slumped and staring into the middle distance, there is Rudolf Hess. He does not look like a man facing justice. He looks like a man who has already decided this has nothing to do with him. From the opening sessions, Hess behaved in ways that baffled everyone in the courtroom. He claimed to have lost his memory. He sat through testimony about concentration camps, mass shootings, the systematic murder of millions, and he appeared to feel nothing. Some days he read novels during proceedings. On others he stared blankly as survivors described horrors he had helped make possible. The psychiatrists who examined him were divided. Some believed the amnesia was genuine, possibly the result of psychological trauma or dissociation. Others were convinced it was a performance, a shield. Then, on the day he was due to be declared mentally unfit to stand trial, Hess abruptly announced his memory had returned. The tribunal, many suspected, had been played. When given the chance to speak in his own defense, he did not apologize. He did not express regret. He declared, and these were his words, that he regretted nothing, that if he were to go back, he would do it all again. The courtroom fell silent. He was convicted on 2 counts, crimes against peace and conspiracy. Sentenced to life imprisonment, he did not flinch. Spandau Prison, West Berlin. Built to hold 600, for most of its final decades, it held one. Rudolf Hess arrived in 1947 alongside 6 other convicted war criminals. One by one, they died or were released. By 1966, Hess was alone, the sole inmate of a massive Prussian fortress, guarded around the clock by rotating Soviet, American, British, and French soldiers. The cost of maintaining the prison for a single elderly man ran into millions. Requests for his release, on humanitarian grounds, on grounds of age, on grounds of sheer absurdity, were made repeatedly. The Soviets refused every time. He tended a small garden. He wrote letters to his family. He walked the perimeter alone. He never broke, never recanted. In 40 years of imprisonment, Rudolf Hess gave no indication of remorse, no acknowledgement of guilt, no moment of reckoning. on the 17th of August, 1987, at the age of 93, Rudolf Hess was found dead in a garden outbuilding. An electrical cord had been used. The official verdict was suicide. His family disputed it for decades, arguing he was physically incapable of carrying it out himself. The question, like so many surrounding this man, was never conclusively answered. Spandau was demolished within weeks, reduced to rubble so it could never become a shrine. So here's the question we started with, the one that makes Rudolf Hess so unsettling, not just as a historical figure, but as a human being. Did he genuinely believe he had done nothing wrong? The evidence, his words, his silences, his 40 years in a cell, suggest the answer is yes. And that is, in some ways, more frightening than if he had been a cynical opportunist. Opportunists know what they're doing. They can be reached. They can recalculate. Hess couldn't be reached. The ideology had gone all the way down. Hitler wasn't just his leader. He was his meaning. The movement wasn't just politics. It was his identity. And when you take everything a person is and wrap it inside a belief system, the mind will protect that belief system at almost any cost. Even at Nuremberg, even in a cell, even at the end. Rudolf Hess is not a mystery. He is a warning about what happens when devotion replaces judgment, when loyalty replaces conscience, when a human being surrenders the thing that makes accountability possible, the ability to look at what you've done and call it what it is. He regretted nothing, and that should haunt us.